I just want to take a quick look ahead of what's going on. So we basically have, I think we've got 5 classes left, including today. So we're mostly going to deal with authentication today. We'll see how far we get with it. I allocated 2 classes for authentication. If we can get lots done today, then we might start with Angular React next week. We'll see how it goes. So we may add 1 more week of dealing with Angular React. I'm not sure. So assignment 2 is basically due in a month. It'll be due on Thursday the 28th. I'm just working on that. I'll have it, I will definitely have it ready for the start of next week's class, and we'll talk about it at the beginning of next week. That'll still give you 20 days to do it. If I give you the assignment next week, which should be enough time. It's almost done, but there's a couple things I want to see how our schedule goes with so that I know what requirements to put in and which ones I should leave out. All right. Just before we there is one other thing I just quickly want to look at, because we didn't really talk about it. We've been working with MongoDB and non-relational data for a few weeks. You had to go through it on your exam. You'll obviously need to do it in your, that's going to be part of the assignment, is using MongoDB. But one thing we haven't actually looked at is, what do relationships look like in MongoDB? So, I mean, we typically will use a NoSQL database in the event that we have a relatively simple data model, but that doesn't mean we don't have any related data at all. So when we're working with a relational database, it's pretty clear how we make relationships. We identify one-to-many relationships. If we have many-to-many relationships, we reconcile those. We break those into 2 one-to-many relationships. But what about, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I just want to touch on some of the suggestions here. So what happens if we need something like a one-to-many relationship? So let's say we take our pizza orders. In that database, all we had was an orders collection, but maybe we want to have a users collection as well. So we've got this relationship between users and orders. Something like one user can make many orders. One order belongs to one and only one user. So there isn't really a right and a wrong way to do this. It would be obvious how we would do this in a relational database, right? How would you do it in a relational database? How would you set up that connection between orders and users, or orders and customers? So, sorry? Yeah, okay, so we'd have 2 tables. Yep. 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 Right. So each child table is going to have a foreign key that'll represent that one-to-many. So every order has to have a customer ID, for example. It's a little fuzzier when we're dealing with a non-relational database. So there's a few ways of doing it. So it's not enough to say what's the nature of the relationship, like what's the parent, what's the child, but we have to think about it this way. So there's a few different options. So one is where we're talking about a one-to-few. So for example, something like in, let's say, your Amazon account, you may have an address book where you've bought products and shipped them to multiple addresses. We'd say that's a one-to-few because realistically, most users probably aren't going to have an address book with thousands of different addresses in it, right? We might have a couple. It's theoretically possible to add an unlimited number of addresses to, say, your Amazon address book, but the realistic use case is most people aren't going to need to do that. So in that case, if we've got this one-to-few, I realize it's maybe a little hard to see. Maybe I'll dim the light. Yeah, the link is on D2L. So in the instance where we might have a one-to-few relationship, the most common way to represent this in a non-relational database is just to nest that few inside of the one. So in this here, we've got a person object, and then inside we've got multiple addresses. Or for example, if this was a student record, we might have like a transcript where we have overall your final grades. You don't get that many. You might get, in the course of your entire diploma, you might have what, 20, 30. So it would be possible to have a student record where it would have, a course code and a final grade in each one. It's not going to be thousands and thousands of nested records. So in the instance where we've got one to few, this is probably the typical way we would do it, is we would nest the child data inside the parent object. So the advantage of this is this makes querying really fast because everything is in a single document, right? We can go and get that user and it brings all their addresses automatically. We don't have to do a join and connect to different parts of the database. The disadvantage is the only way we can access these addresses is through the parent record. So for example, if we wanted a list of, hey, what are all the places we ship to in our whole database, we don't have the addresses stored separately. They're only in here, so we have to go through all of the customer records in order to get at the addresses, which isn't terribly efficient. It's still possible for us to model a more of a one-to-many, traditional one-to-many relationship. And in this case, we would basically use something like a foreign key. So we would reference the ID from the parent table in the child. So you can still do this when it makes sense. So if we're going to have a real one-to-many, it probably makes sense. So something like if we think about products and orders, right? Well, hopefully we have thousands of orders. So one product, we want it to be ordered tens of thousands of times. So we're probably just going to store a product ID inside the order. So we can still mimic. There's also this, gets a little more complicated, which would be something they call the one-to-squillions. So something like an event logging system where we're going to have massive amounts of data. Right. That could well be. Actually, I'm sorry. This is more of the traditional structure. So here, every host has basically a foreign key in it. Now, they're not called foreign keys, and there's no integrity enforced like in a relational database. In a relational database, if we have customer IDs 1, 2, and 3, we can't have an order attached to customer ID 5. But in a non-relational database, the database doesn't care. So if you want to enforce integrity, we have to do that in our application code. So another example of sort of this one-to-squillions would be this research project that we're working on, because we've got a whole bunch of IoT devices, and those devices can be programmed to record current environment data like every 5 seconds from now to the end of time. So we'll just record every time we take a reading, we'll just include the device ID as basically a value. So this article's here. I've left it in the lesson 8 folder. It's just here for reference. So it's more flexible. There's not really hard and fast rules around data relationships when we're working with NoSQL databases. And this is true of Mongo or any other non-relational database. So if you use something like Firebase, you use something like SQLite, there are other non-relational DB products, but they all kind of follow these same sort of flexible, fluid principles. So this would be something to keep in mind when you build your assignment, that there isn't a right and a wrong. It'll be up to you if you want to embed nested data or if you want to put it in a separate collection and tie those together by IDs. All right. Maybe I'll turn my lights back up a little bit. I'll keep John away. Okay, so I'm going to open up the project we've been working on. Yeah, we'll open up our task manager. So actually, I was playing around with this. I'll show you kind of the end product of what we'd kind of want to have working. So I have kind of a testing version. So this is what we want. So when I launch my server, I will be an anonymous user. So notice you'll see changes on the nav bar. So my tasks link is not here. And now I've got 2 links over here to register and log in. So I've already created an account. So we want it to work something like this. So when I log in, I suddenly now have access to the tasks menu. My username and log out show up here in the nav bar, register and log in, go away. And also all of my pages related, everything inside my tasks controller is private, so that if I log out and try and go back here, I get sent back to login. So this is what we want to do. Or I try and go to tasks, add, just keeps sending me to login. So this is what we want to enable in the project. So I'll get my project running as we left it off last week. Morning, enjoying the lovely Spanish weather outside?
Yeah.
Just like home?
Yeah, my body was terminated and I don't know
What's the temperature at home right now?
warmer than here for sure.
What city are you from, Serge? Let's see. I'm sure it's terrible in Barcelona right now.
Maybe raining.
Let's see. Cloudy and 21 degrees. Sounds rough. Class field trip? Maybe. Yeah, next week's class will be in Barcelona. So what we're going to use is an NPM package, a couple NPM packages, but the primary one that's used in Node, That's kind of industry standard. It's a bit weird. There's a good and a bad. Yeah, we may encounter some ugly too. So the package is called Passport. Passport works quite well. It has a lot of additional hooks for doing things like social authentication. It's very widely used. Still downloaded, 700,000 times a week. But here's the odd thing. It's not being updated anymore. It hasn't been updated for 2 years, and I'm not sure why. So it's somewhat surprising if it's not being updated that it's still being used. Nothing's really come along better to replace it. And why the original developer hasn't kept it up, I'm not sure. So what supplemental resources here. So this tutorial, this is similar to what we're going to do with our task manager. So he sets an application up from scratch and then goes through the process of implementing. So a lot of the stuff up at the beginning we've already done, but then he goes through implementing registration, login. So we're going to use some of what's in here, but not everything. There's also a decent video walkthrough here about working with Passport. So these are here for your reference as kind of supplemental materials. So this is just a short video. It's kind of a really quick walkthrough of implementing Passport in an Express application. So it's pretty well done. It's a little bit dated, but the fundamentals are kind of still the same. So if we look at what it tells us about Passport, we'll want to install the package. Passport has this notion of strategies. So what do we mean by strategy? It says there are 300 plus strategies, and the strategies, here are some of them here. So we're going to start with a local strategy, meaning we're authenticating through our own database. And then we'll also look at maybe using some of these other hooks. We may or may not have time to get into them today. So that may bleed into next week. We'll see. But it's fairly easy to implement. So Passport is the primary package we want. And then we're going to want, I've listed here, we actually want all of these. So we're going to use Passport, which is the main middleware for doing authentication. We're going to want Passport local because we want a local strategy where the users are stored in our MongoDB. This Passport local Mongoose, this is just a package that allows Mongoose to interface between Passport and our database. And the last one we'll want is an Express session package that does, the name's probably pretty self-explanatory, used for session management in an Express application so that we can store information about logged in users in a session object. So we're going to want to install these 4 packages. So my application is running here, but I'll need to stop it so that we can install these things.
So Passport local, does that mean that it would only it keeps the data of the records local on the machine?
No, it's a local data store, local to the application, as opposed to third-party authentication like Google or Facebook.
Okay.
So I'm going to install all 4 of these packages. Now I could write 4 separate commands, but you can actually run one npm install command. You just have to separate the package names with spaces. And I also want to use the ---- save option so these dependencies get tracked in package.json. I can see the names up here, and make this a little bigger so we can see what we're doing. So down here, my command prompt, I'm going to do npmi passport, then a space, and passport-local. I'm going to put all 4 of them in. And I'll add the ---- save option so that my packages.json is tracking these dependencies. I don't have to do the ---- save option. My app will run, but if I don't, when I push this up to GitHub, if one of you downloads it, the package.json isn't going to know that those files are required. I don't know the answer to that. Okay. Okay. We'll have to maybe. Well, it saves them, but it only, with the ---- save, it saves them locally, but it didn't add them to the configuration file. So if you moved the application, it no longer knew that dependency was required. Okay, so I'll take it out and then we'll look in package.json afterwards and see if these 4 are in there. Then we'll know. So you can run 4 separate install commands, but there's no need. Easier just to separate the package names. Space. So if we look at package.json, yeah, it did add them. So our ---- save. Yep, no longer seems to be necessary. So I'll use nodemon now to restart my server. My terminal says we're connected to MongoDB, and our task manager should be active. Yep, so we can add edit. So our application's in the same state it was a few weeks ago. We've just added those dependencies now. Now for our next trick, we need to create register and login forms. They're just straight HTML pages. I don't want to waste class time having you type out the HTML, so I have just given this to you. So there's 2 items here in the week 8 folder. This is register.hbs with all the HTML you need. And here's login HBS. So what I want you to do is create these 2 files in the views folder, just copy and paste the HTML into them. And then we'll write the routes, the route handlers to load these. Because right now our register and login links, they don't do anything. So just grab the HTML from each one and create each file. Yeah, because it uses a rich text editor. So it'll keep that formatting. So I'll grab the first file, and in views, I'll just make a new file called register.hbs and paste it in. I've also, so it's basically a standard form. The one thing I've added here, I've added a regular expression for a password. So it's enforcing that it must be 8 characters with both at least an upper and lower case. So also go and create login.hps. HBS, and grab the HTML for that one. I don't think our time is well served by creating HTML forms at this point. It's in the password and confirm. Yeah, not in the login, it's in the register.
It'd be really nice to have a class in one of our programming classes, one class on regular expression.
Okay, I'd be a terrible person to teach it. I probably need to take that class. But that's, it probably makes the most sense for that to be part of programming fundamentals, like that semester 1, your first Java course, where you learn, you know, this is a variable, this is a loop, this is an if statement. That's probably the best place for it so that you have it right from semester 1. Yes. I would email that suggestion to both Ross, email it to me, Ross, and Jarrett. Okay, so I've saved those two, but notice the links on my nav bar, if you see the status bar at the bottom left, the register and login links don't go anywhere. So we've created these views, but we need to change the links, and then we need to create route handlers for these paths. Because right now there's no way to actually load these views, we just download it. So let's open up our layout file. And you'll notice we just have a hashtag for register and login. So let's change these. So these should go to /register and /login. So if I refresh now, I can click on register and we get a 404. Why do we get the 404? We've created register. Why is that link not working? We haven't made a what? Yeah, we haven't made a route. We haven't told Express what to do when it gets a request at localhost /register and localhost /login. So where would we go to fix this? Where should we put these routes? No, I think you said it. Yeah, let's go to our index controller, because we have routes for home and about. I mean, we could make a separate controller if you want to handle everything to do with authentication. Sure, okay, let's do it that way. But then we have to change the path. So if we're going to create another controller, that's fine, but then these routes are handled by the index controller. So if you want the path to just be route /register, it's going to be handled in index. If we want to make a separate controller for this, then we're going to have to create a new controller and put in a different path. So for now, okay, we'll leave it. Peter, if you're happy, I'm happy. So we'll go to index. We've already got 2 routes here. So we just need to basically set up 2 get handlers. One for /register that we'll call res.render the register view, and a separate one for login. So this should fix our, whoops. This should fix our 404 errors. We now have told Express what to do at each of those URL paths. At /register, load the view called register. At /login, load the view called login. Okay, so now if I click register, we get our form. If I click login, we get this form. So our get handlers are fairly simple. We're also going to need post handlers for each one, because right now if you submit either form, we're going to get 404. We've only told the server how to handle get requests at /login and /register. If I put something in here, we can expect 404 because there is no post handler. So we're going to need to make a bunch of changes to app.js to configure Passport. We've installed it, but there's no reference to it. It's not doing it. It's in the project, but it isn't being used at all. It's sitting on the bench right now. We need to put it in the game. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make a model that will handle our users or our accounts. So we've got one model, we've got a task model. We want to make a new JavaScript file. I'll call it user, singular and lowercase. So here's my user.js. Now this is going to look, I'll just open up our task.js. It's going to look fairly similar to this with one exception. Actually, sorry, two exceptions. So we do need to reference Mongoose. And we'll set up a new schema just like we did before. Whoops. You know, and that should be a capital S. My apologies. Now, the only properties we actually need to define here are a username and password. We'll want to make this public, so we'll export it. We'll export it with the public name of user. So far, this is exactly the same as what we've done in our task model. guess I called it task schema here, but. So right now, this is just a generic class. Thank you. We don't need to indicate that because so far it is just a generic class, right? It's modeled, it's no different than our task class. However, we're going to add a couple of other things, and one of the dependencies we're going to add is going to take care of that for us. No. So the two other things we want, actually it's one other thing, is this. This is where we're using this Passport local mongoose package. So this package is we're going to use this package to basically tell Passport, hey, this is the class for user management. So we take our class and we're going to plug it in to Passport local mongoose. So this basically says this is not a regular model. This is a model designed to manage user authentication. So Peter, coming back to your question, when we reference Passport local mongoose and plug our object into that package, it'll handle. So it will salt and hash the password. So you'll notice actually when I did this, it was probably actually good that I think I had it like this originally, which I didn't mean to. And you'll notice when I started changing it, it actually prompted me with password already. It's here. So you'll notice Passport local mongoose has things like password validator, etc. So it has a whole bunch of properties and methods for handling authentication. So here, that's just a reference to my Passport local mongoose. So we're in effect converting this regular class object to a user management class designed to work with authentication by Passport local mongoose. In a way. Yeah, it's not a data type conversion. It's basically saying, make this object available as this type. So you'll notice our regular class, our other models, don't have these things. Those are just regular business objects. Yes. There probably are. Are there other classes that I've used? No. But there probably are. Yes. So yeah, can you see here, so plugin is a mongoose specific method. So we can plug it in this case, to Passport local mongoose. We could plug it into some other mongoose package. I can't think of a good example of what else we might do off the top of my head. And it's sort of related to your question as well, Peter, like what other kind of class could we have? Actually, let's have a quick look. Why don't we do that? I'll just go to Mongoose for a minute. Let's have a look at if they give us any other examples with if we look at that plugin method, what else does it tell us? We'll take a break in a minute. Let's go to the docs and see. So they allow pre-packaged capabilities to extend functionality. I can't say this really gives us. Okay, so they've got, for example, an auto-populate. It will always populate certain fields in the schema. Yes. So there are lean getters. So in effect, we're extending functionality. We're attaching our schema, our Mongoose object, to some other library to give it more functionality than what Mongoose comes with out of the box. Yeah, Passport. Actually, let's see. Let's just have a quick look. It is made by somebody else, yes. So somebody built this to sit on top of Passport. Passport is fairly lean. At its the core of it is lean. Actually, yeah, so you plug it into your user schema, which is what we've just done. You can define user however you like. Passport local Mongoose automatically has username, hash, and salt. So Passport itself does not include any hashing. So that's one of the benefits of adding this plugin on top of it. So it's basically an extension library for Passport if we're doing local user storage through Mongoose. And then it also has these methods we're going to use, serialize and deserialize. That basically reads the user to the session object. That serialize will write the user into the session and deserialize. So we're going to need some of this code in our app.js. Okay, it's 5 to 9. We're going to take a break. I'm going to go grab a coffee. We'll resume configuring our application to work with this when we come back. I don't think I'm going to bother pushing to Git because I haven't really done much except create that one class and add the packages and copy and paste HTML.